So this is week 7, and our focus is nature and mental health, the ecological environment, and mental health issues. Um the ecological environment and mental health. Yeah. So the relationship between environment and the human psyche is increasingly recognized as one of survival rather than a mere proximity. So while natural landscapes are traditionally viewed as therapeutic, the emergence of hostile ecological environments characterized by pollution, climate instability, and resource depletion has become a significant driver of psychological trauma. So we are saying that the ecological environment can contribute to psychological trauma. So this ecological hostility does not merely threaten physical safety, it actively erodes mental stability, manifesting in disorders ranging from eco-anxiety to profound sense of stress, where the home environment becomes a source of distress rather than comfort. So the ecological environment can lead to a pathological conditions. It can affect our mental health. And that's why people who live in very hostile environmental conditions, um, they become subject to anxiety and other psychological issues. So that's the assumption of this particular session, that there is a nexus between the ecological environment and mental health. So when you go to places like, dry places like Northeastern, or you go to, Somalia, places which are very dry. If you go to also um, places like Sahara Desert, and I'm sure even those who live in cold places, those who have winter, they do not experience the same health status or mental health status or the same mood in winter compared to spring, autumn, and other seasons, because the change in the ecological environment is likely to affect the mental health of individuals. So let's move on. So what are our expected learning outcomes? To evaluate how hostile and decentered ecological environments function as systematic stressors that trigger psychological fragmentation and anxiety. That is one. Two, assess the relationship between environmental exploitation and human mental disease demonstrating how greed-driven ecological destruction mirrors internal psychological breakdown. That where there's environmental exploitation, um, there is a nexus between that and our psyche. The way the environment is suffering, then our mental or our psyche is likely to suffer that way. Analyze how the transition from vibrant, warm ecosystem of the Caribbean to the cold, gray, and hostile urban ecology of London catalyzes Anne Morgan's descent into depression, and then evaluate how the oppressive physical landscape of Kafir El-Tin, the heat, the dust, and the mayor's godlike control over the Nile resources functions as a site for psychological entrapment in Zakea in Nawal el-Sadawi. Although we may not go into Nawal el-Sadawi for now, but because I think I taught you Voyage in the Dark, we will use as an example. So according to Albrecht 2019, the experience of negative environmental change leads to solastalgia. So Albrecht, one of the scholars in mental health called Albrecht, talks about a condition called solastalgia, the distress caused by the transformation and desolation of one's home environment. That where you are living, just where you are living, if the environment changes, if the environment in Bomet there starts to change, it's likely to affect you. You will start having mental health challenges As the environment degrades, your mood will change, and immediately you will start having some disturbances because you are used to a certain weather patterns. So when they start changing, Albrecht says that you will start suffering from some mental issues, anxiety. You will start changing, not because you have changed your environment, but because your ecological environment is changing, and that will start affecting your mental stability. You start having anxiety problem, pathology will come in. Some psychological disturbances will start happening to you just because the weather in Bomet is changing. If I'm in Murang'a or I'm in Bungoma, and then the weather starts changing, according to Albrecht, I will start experiencing some psychological anxiety and challenges as the weather changes from maybe hot to cold or from cold to hot. So this ecological hostility erodes the vital connection between place and identity, that all of us are connected to where we live. If you live in Bomet, like you, where you are there is a way you have a certain connection to Bomet. So if the weather starts changing, then you get alienated from it and it will affect you. You'll wonder what is happening to my home environment. Because your home determines your identity. You love your places, you love the forests, you are aware of the places around you, and it forms part of your identity. So if the ecological environment starts changing in your area, then you suffer from a condition called solastalgia, distress caused by transformation of your home natural environment. So consequently, the instability of the natural world is mirrored internally, proving that a ravaged ecosystem inevitably undermines the cognitive and emotional stability of those who inhabit it. Yeah, that because of where we live, when the place starts getting ravaged, then everything will change. Everything will change, and you will start experiencing that. So maybe if I may ask you, Sheila, yeah, if I may ask you, do you think Albrecht has a point, or is just rumor mongering? What do you think? What do you think?
Yes, I think to some extent she has a point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think the change of the climate can sometimes cause distress because there is what someone is used to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can for example, if you live in a warm area and then suddenly, yeah, you start experiencing a lot of cold, or you are used to a dry environment, and then suddenly you start having very cold, very cold temperatures. Um, sometimes even sleeping now, like especially if it becomes hot, even you may not even sleep well. Like sometimes when Muranga gets hot, I even get um, sleep disturbances because I'm not used to a very hot Moranga as such. So, yeah, he has some point. He has some point. So Albrecht 2019, in her research, so we want to look at now Albrecht's thesis. Yeah. So in this work, Earth Emotions, um, the theorist provides a foundational framework for understanding how environmental degradation is not merely an external crisis, but an internal psychological one. An internal psychological one. So his thesis can be analyzed through the following 4 points. One, the concept of solastalgia. So according to Albrecht, you know, solastalgia describes a specific form of psychic fear. So unlike nostalgia, the longing for a place one has left, solastalgia is a lived experience of a negative environmental change while one is still at home. So you are just in your area, and then there is that change in climate. So that is what we call nostalgia. You start having now that fear, that anxiety, which then destabilizes your mind. Yeah. And of course, um, this is in the bounds of degradation of one's ecological environment. Yeah, if the environment changes, it gets degraded, as in it changes negatively. This is when somebody will suffer from solastalgia. Then number two, ontological security. According to Albrecht, the human mental health is anchored in ontological security, the sense of order and continuity in our lives, and also in the physical environment. So we believe we have a sense of continuity when the climate, the ecological environment is stable and reliable. Yeah. We cannot feel that sense of continuity if the physical environment keeps changing. The natural environment keeps changing. So we will lose ontological security, that sense of order and continuity. And maybe when I was just trying to explain to you why we cannot stop we cannot stop our lectures. It's reminding me this concept of ontological insecurity. Again, our courses are still new. Actually, you are the pioneer students. You are the pioneer students. And so if we just start scattering what? Lectures. For example, if we had like one lecture in 4 weeks, some of you will just fall off. Because this is not like face-to-face where you are inside the university. Online lessons are very fragmented. And so as a teacher, for me to ensure there is ontological security, that sense of continuity and order, I must make sure that every week we are having lessons. And then with the time, you will just know Monday is cell 801, Tuesday is cell 803, Wednesday is this. That sense of continuity must be established. And it is very important. When you suffer ontological insecurity, it's one of the major causes of psychological problems. When there is that lack of order and continuity in our lives, even in our social lives, in our economic life. Um, so even when you start working, Sheila, when you start working, there should be that sense of stability and continuity and order. Otherwise, if you work, you do one job for 3 months, and then you leave and go elsewhere, there will be no sense of order and continuity. And you'll even start having some disturbances. Why is it that there is no order in my life? Why is it that there is no continuity in my life? So human beings always want ontological security. So when the environment keeps changing, when the natural environment keeps changing, like this year, we're experiencing very long periods of what? Of drought. Yeah, we are wondering because in most parts of Kenya, at least by now, because we are approaching March, at least by now, we are supposed to be seeing some signs of rain, and all that. So when the ecological environment becomes very unpredictable, then there is that sense of ontological insecurity, lack of continuity and order, which destroys our stability. So then there is the concept of psychoterapeutic relationship. So this highlights, the mind and earth relationship, suggesting that the human psyche is an extension of the ecosystem. So according to Albrecht, the human psyche is an extension of the ecological system. Albrecht argues that the disease of the modern mind is a direct reflection of the illness of the planet. That when the planet is ill, therefore people's minds will be ill. That naturally we are connected to our ecosystem. That's the concept of psychotherapeutic. Psychotherapy. Yeah. But then there is that relationship between our mind and our ecosystem. And so if our ecosystem is sick, then our mind will also be sick. So if you live in a place which is very noisy, like most people live in most of these slum areas with a lot of pollution and a lot of problems, you'll discover that if you also look at their minds, they don't think very rationally. Um, you just look around. If you live in the place where people live, it also determines the depth of their thought and their mental health. It affects a lot. But anyway, that's a theory by average that if the environment is sick, then we are also sick. So an unhealthy ecosystem leads to mental health issues, and so on. Then ecological alienation and identity. Average emphasizes that our identities are tied to place. A hostile environment severes this topophilia, that's love of place. So when the landscape is degraded by industrial and climatic forces, the individual experiences a loss of self. The individual experiences a loss of self. So that when we alienate, they exploit the environment and alienate it, then the individual also experiences those particular challenges. So we now look at the ecological environment and mental health in Voyage in the Dark. In Voyage in the Dark, and you know the picture of Jean Rice. So in Jean Rice, Voyage in the Dark, Anna Morgan's psychological disintegration is not merely a result of interpersonal trauma, but is deeply rooted in the ecological dislocation. Yeah, that's because she is dislocated from the warm Caribbean to the cold England. Yeah, it triggers her psychological disintegration. So by applying the tenets of Nyongesa 2021, this is one of my books, and Outbreak 2019, we can see how the shift from the Caribbean hinterland to the London metropole creates a terminal fracture in her mental health. Yeah. So that is that. Then we look at the somatic geography. One of the causes of Anne's problem is somatic geography. The Caribbean heat was an affirmation of existence. Anne considers her Caribbean existence an affirmation of her existence. But when she is transplanted to London, her body loses its geographical anchor. That geographical anchor in place is lost. So the biting English cold is experienced as a physical assault that freezes her internal agency, leading to the lethargy and depressive stupor that define her London life. When you look at her life in London, Anne is always complaining that London is too cold. Yeah. So that kind of uprootment from a warm place to a very cold place. So we talk about somatic disorders. These are psychological disorders. They are pathological disorders. And so we are saying the geography in England is one of the major causes of the somatic condition that she acquires, after moving to London. Yeah. So the English cold is experienced as a physical assault to her internal agency, leading to the lethargy, that disease. She is always sickly and depressive stupor and depressed. So depression is one of the pathological conditions, and it arises from the cold in England. So you can see that the ecological setting can determine our mental health. And depression is one of the mental health issues we are talking about. Then the trauma of environmental erasure. So the colonial environments often seek to erase indigenous sensory history. So London's grayness and monochromatic ribbons, the place looks very plain, very monotonous. Things almost look the same everywhere. And she complains that in this place there is no beauty because almost every place looks the same. So this kind of grayness and monotony acts as a tool for erasure, that her identity is being erased by another identity which she does not recognize. So Anne's mental health declines because she cannot find any sensory mirrors in the city. So the absence of the violent reds of the hibiscus leads to graying of the self. So the self is also grayed by the gray in the environment, where her identity becomes as indistinct as the London fog. So she loses that sense of identity, and the grayness everywhere does not really, please her. Then there's what we call rhythmic dissonance. According to my book, mental stability relies on the synchronization of human and ecological rhythms. We need to synchronize our human and ecological rhythms. There is a rhythm we are used to in Kenya. When you go to another place where the sun only appears 3 hours per day, there will be no that kind of intersection between you and the new environment. So Anne's Caribbean life was defined by the pulsing presence of the sun. You see, she could see the sun 12 hours per day. But now here, these places where in winter, you find the day is very long and you don't see the sun easily. And these things really affect Anne because she went there when she was still young. In fact, by the time the book she's in the book, she's only 19 years. She was 19 years. So she went to England when she was very young, but she had gotten used to the Caribbean sun. So London's mechanical and uniform architecture imposes a rigid industrial rhythm that contradicts her internal biological clock. So this dissonance catalyzes her dissociation, you see? And without dissociation, I talk about dissociative identity disorder. The psyche will collapse or it will be fractured, and then somebody can end up with other selves within. Somebody can have even 5 personalities in one. That's what we call DID, or dissociative identity disorder. So she feels like a ghost because she's vibrating at a different frequency than the urban grid. Yeah, she was not used to this kind of life. She was not used to this weather and these patterns, these rhythms of life, winter, summer. So when you go to those places, you will have to get used. You'll have to get used to certain conditions which we cannot find in the Caribbean or Africa. And then we also have solastalgia. So Albrecht 2019 defines solastalgia as the distress caused by environmental change. Although Anna has improved physically, she experiences a form of solastalgia where her remembered home is being overwritten by the hostile ecological presence. Yeah, so the change of environment also affects, although this is more of nostalgia, than even solastalgia. So this creates a state of permanent exile. Her depression is a manifestation of this chronic sorrow for a lost ecosystem. Then psychotherapeutic syndrome. So Albrecht suggests that mental health is a psychotherapeutic state. It's a direct reflection of the Earth's condition. So Anne's London environment is sterile and polluted, mirroring her interchangeable rooms of despair.
Chips. Chips, no? No, chip.
Yeah, so Anne's London environment is sterile and polluted, mirroring her internal interchangeable rooms. Internal interchangeable rooms of despair. The hostile urban ecology does not just surround her, it invades her. So that's why we are saying there is a nexus between the ecosystem and our mental health. So the new ecosystem, the way it looks very polluted, it looks hostile. That is how Anne becomes. That's how Anne becomes. It is very dull, monotonous. Yeah, so the place where you live, basically, according to Albrecht, it affects your mental health. It makes you to be the way you are. It makes you to be the way you are. It makes you to be the way you are. Then we have the somateratic exhaustion. So finally, Albrecht identified somateratic exhaustion as the physical drain caused by living in an environment that actively repels the subject. When you live in a place where you are repelled, it does not like you, you are hated, then you become a displaced organism whose vital signs are slowing. So our inability to find a foothold in the urban grid results in a total collapse of her psychological immune system. Of her psychological immune system. And that's why Anne is always sick. And also the depressions and all that, they arise from this kind of exhaustion because the place is very draining and the place repels her. And it's not just the culture, it's even the natural environment. Anne does not like the natural environment of the Caribbean. So the clinical nature of the novel's ending, the abortion and the starting all over again is the ultimate manifestation of a body and a mind exhausted by an incompatible ecological locus. So he cannot really fit in this environment because of the weather. So then we have now a scenario here. So I want you will do this scenario. You do this scenario and submit for marking. So Anne Morgan stands by the window of her boarding house in Camden Town, watching the sleet town turn the London pavement into a sleek monochromatic ribbon. In this moment, the transition from her vibrant, warm ecosystem to the hostile urban ecology is complete. Back in the West Indies, the sun was not merely a source of light. It was an ontological weight, a pulsing presence that anchored her body to the earth. Yeah, there the heat was a garment she wore comfortably, a sensory affirmation of her existence. Now the cold of London acts as a tool of colonial erasure. It is a biting wind that does not just chill the skin, but seems to freeze her internal urgency as the gray stone of the city swallows the afternoon light. Anne experiences the first sharp pang of sensory dissociation. The colors of her memory, the violet reds of the hibiscus, and the deep electric blues of the Caribbean Sea begin to feel more real than the dingy wallpaper of her current room. So this is the sensory hinterland, a psychological survival mechanism where her consciousness detaches from the reality that offers no warmth. Her descent into depression is catalyzed by this environmental sterility. London's architecture, narrow, stifling, and uniform, then it mirrors the mechanical nature of life she's expected to lead. She feels like a ghost because her body, programmed for the expansive, rhythmic life of the tropics, cannot find foothold in the urban grid. Time becomes a series of interchangeable rooms. She's no longer a woman in the city. She is a displaced organism whose vital signs are slowing in the incompatible climate. So questions from the hostile London ecology the hostile London ecology has successfully dismantled her psychological stability, leaving her in a state of permanent exile, where she is physically in England, but somatically or spiritually elsewhere. Okay, so analyze how rise characterizes the cold of London as more than a temperature change. In what ways does the author present the English climate as a specific tool of colonial erasure that strips Anne of her internal agency? 5 marks. Discuss the relationship between London's narrow, stifling architecture and Anne's feeling of becoming a ghost. How does the urban infrastructure of the metropole contribute to the protagonist's psychological fragmentation? And this is also 5 marks. So the scenario is 10 marks. And then you will need one more presentation and a term paper. When we began, I gave you a term paper on Charles Dickens, which you people did not do. I also gave you another one on one of my books, which you did not do. So let me choose Charles Dickens. It's the term paper in the, I think, in first or second lessons. The first or second lesson. It is on ecological themes in hard times by Charles Dickens. And you'll write a term paper But you write a term. I think that one I need a term paper, and then I'll look for one more presentation, not on hard times. So hard times, I want you to write a term paper. It was among the first. I don't know if I should give you that one or I should give you. Did you get my book, Sheila? Did you get my book, Armageddon? Mm. Did you get the Armageddon and other short stories?
I'm yet to start. I'm yet to.
I had to get it.
Yeah.
I think another way is to write a term paper on hard times. It must be the second. I will confirm. It must be the second session. I'll look for it and share it on the portal. Then both of you should do this one. This scenario. You need to also know how to respond to scenarios. You will find them in the next set of cards. You will find scenarios. Not cards, even exams. One of these exams, you will just walk in and you find a scenario. So you also need to know how scenarios are set and how they are tackled. So I think that's the end of my lesson. So this one, just do it, and then there is I don't know, how far have you reached in the portal? Have you been going through those activities?
Yes, I've seen them, sir.
Which week? On which week? On week what?
Let me check.
Because this is now week 7, and the scenario is on week
Okay.
7. So, and for you to reach week 7, you must pass through most of those activities. But some of them you can just write anything to let you pass. So this one you can respond through the portal, or if you have difficulties, use email, so that I mark. So this is one of the activities. This is 10 marks, and then the first presentation was also 10 marks. Each of the activities I give you for exam is 10. I'll give you up to 4, so that you get out of. But the term paper will also be marked out of 10. Then you will need one more activity. So I will check and see. But I've given you one on Charles Dickens on session 2. I'll go and look for it, because you don't want, again, maybe a book which you may not have. But any question? Any questions so far? Any question, Sheila? Or any concern?
I have no questions.
All right.
I have no questions.
Okay, then have a nice evening. Yeah.
Have a nice evening too, sir. Thank
Then
you.
sure you sign the attendance. Huh?
Okay.